Idaho is trying to ban gay marriage across the country. Check out our gay couples coupon books and Storms Don't Last Forever pins. Get yours today at ProfessorPride.com. If you're looking for a good vacation this spring, why not visit Idaho? A state that if you search Google for fun things to do in Idaho, you'd get this as your first and top result of fun things to do. Yes, sadly the highest rated apparently fun thing to do in all of Idaho is visit the Aryan Nations headquarters just north of Hayden, Idaho. For those who don't know, Aryan Nations is another name for Nazis, so you can likely tell where this story is heading already. Idaho has long been controlled by a supermajority of Republicans since at least 1992. Out of their 70 House members, 61 of them are Republican, and just 9 are Democrat. Their Senate isn't much better with 29 Republicans and just 6 Democrats. Mix in their Republican governor, Brad Little, and you get a supermajority that can pass nearly anything they want to. Their state Congress just went into session earlier this week for their first official acts after being re-elected or newly elected to office in November. But their first joint act, called House Joint Memorial 1, is a non-binding resolution that claims the U.S. Supreme Court oversteps its authority by requiring states to recognize same-sex marriage. Yes, this was the first act of business they had. Thank goodness they're not funding their schools, which have been rated the, quote, worst funded schools in the nation. But this resolution calls for the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn its decision on the June 26, 2015 case on Obergefell v. Hodges. That was a landmark decision stating that marriage equality between same-sex couples could legally be married, and every state in the country had to legally recognize the marriage. Since that case in 2015, multiple studies found a vast majority of Americans, up to 80% in some studies, support marriage equality. But the resolution from Idaho calls for marriage to be returned to the, quote, natural definition as between one man and one woman. Now, it's important to note that this is not legally binding. A resolution by a government body is just a formal expression of opinion or intent. Because the Supreme Court ruled on this on the federal level, it means the Idaho state cannot do anything right now. But this resolution does 2 things. First, it means that if the Supreme Court were to reevaluate Obergefell v. Hodges, this resolution tells us Idaho would then have a trigger law put in place to undo gay marriage at a statewide level in Idaho, if that ruling was overturned like Roe v. Wade was on a federal level. Secondly, it tells us that Idaho is publicly calling on the Supreme Court to act upon this. And right now, the U.S. Supreme Court has a supermajority of Republicans too, and they have an incoming president who is one of the most anti-gay presidents to ever hold office, besides Reagan. So they very likely will take the suggestion to reevaluate the case and possibly overturn it. Now, some Democrats think that's impossible, but it happened in Roe v. Wade just a few years ago. And in his decision on that case, certified asshole Clarence Thomas wrote that the Supreme Court should reconsider and said he looks forward to overturning Obergefell v. Hodges, now that Roe v. Wade fell too. The good news is, back in December 2022, President Biden passed the Respect for Marriage law, which requires states to recognize same-sex marriage. But, and it's a nice but, not nicer than my husband's but still, it doesn't mean new marriages would be allowed. It basically means if you're already married, then states have to recognize your marriage on any court documents or on your taxes. But it really never says you can get married in the future. That part was conveniently left out in order to, quote, balance the interest of religious groups.
A lot of you are asking me whether or not your marriage can be overturned, but that's not the right question. What you want to be asking is whether or not the rights inherent in my marriage can be taken away from me. So at the end of the day, your marriage is just a piece of paper. It's a marriage certificate. And the reason why you wanted this marriage certificate is the 1,138 state and federal rights tied to the institution of marriage. That's why we wanted that. So while the government can't take away your piece of paper, they can't take away your marriage certificate, what they can do is attempt to nullify the rights associated with it. The biggest vulnerability in the Respect for Marriage Act is its unfettered religious exemptions. So it was the only way to get the Respect for Marriage Act passed. It was the only way to get bipartisan support was to allow for unfettered religious exemptions. So what we're going to see are what's called RFRA laws, Religious Freedom Restoration Act laws, popping up, which allow people, businesses, organizations, anyone with a religious objection or a religious belief against same-sex marriage to not have to recognize it or respect it. And then secondly, something that they didn't anticipate when they wrote the Respect for Marriage Act was the redefining of sex, the narrow construction and conservative definition of sex only to include male and female. So it stands to reason that if the federal government adopts a definition of sex that only includes male and female, that the rights inherent in the federal government, the rights inherent in marriage from the federal government, that would only go to married couples that make up male and female couples. So that is another way that they can nullify the rights of same-sex couples in marriage. And now, if Obergefell is overturned, which I do think it will, if it's overturned, while the Respect for Marriage Act would stay in effect and exist in law, its practical ability to protect us and provide us the rights inherent in marriage will be significantly reduced.
So overturning Obergefell could still be a problem for our community. Marriages like mine with my gorgeous husband are safe for now, but if you haven't proposed yet or set a date for your wedding yet, it's probably not a terrible idea to start putting things in motion.
If you want to get married and hedge your bets and get this piece of paper, the real deadline is the overturning Obergefell, not January 20th, but really the Obergefell case. So we're at least a year and a half away from an opinion being issued in that. And if you are going to hedge your bets and get married earlier than you would have, do so safely with a prenup. But it absolutely can't hurt to get that piece of paper in advance. Adoptions. That's another area of our lives that will be greatly impacted by the religious exemptions. So if you haven't done a confirmatory adoption or kinship adoption, second parent adoption, please solidify the family unit now, as well as LGBTQ estate planning. So that is our number one impenetrable line of defense. It is how we've been recreating and protecting marriages and relationships for years.
And look, I know this is more bad news on top of a really shitty week. With forest fires raging on the West Coast, plenty of lives lost, trillions in damages, bird flu on the rise, a current president who just actively hurt the trans community after promising to protect them in his State of the Union address for years now, and an incoming president who is a laughingstock of the world leaders because he's trying to annex Canada, Greenland, and Panama, and Iran is somehow helping all of those people defend themselves. It's been weird, and this week has been exhausting to say the least. Normally, I'd say we don't have to worry about state resolutions, but remember, Donald Trump is a Nazi through and through. Even his vice president told us he's a Nazi while attempting to buy Nazi memorabilia at a gun show himself. And remember, the top-rated fun thing to do in all of Idaho is visit the headquarters of the local Nazi chapter. So if you don't think, not only would Trump support this, but he'd sign the anti-gay marriage bill at the Nazi headquarters in Idaho, you're fooling yourself into trusting a man who's given you zero reason to trust him. And please, don't tell me Trump is an ally, because we've already proven that false in many previous episodes of our show. And don't tell me it would never happen, because Roe v. Wade fell years ago, and even certified asshole Clarence Thomas warned us gay marriage would be next, and now it is. So yeah, welcome to 2025, y'all. Happy f***ing New Year to us, right? If you'd like to support our show, check out ProfessorPride.com for hundreds of ways to show off your pride. Check them out now, along with our LGBTQ books, magnets, pins, umbrellas, digital downloads, and more at ProfessorPride.com. Special thanks to our members and subscribers this month who proudly support our work providing LGBTQ education and resources. Please subscribe to our channel or click on this video to continue enjoying Powered by Rainbows.